World War II. The Soviet Union is a land under siege. Nazi tanks carve relentless paths of destruction across the boundless steppe, their iron treads grinding fields into dust and futures into despair. Above, Luftwaffe bombers scream through the skies, raining fire and destruction on cities, leaving trails of smoke, sorrow, and shattered lives. In this crucible of chaos, a young woman steps forward, her eyes sharp as a blade, her resolve forged in fire. Her name is Lyudmila Pavlichenko. History will call her Lady Death. With a sniper's rifle, she will etch her name into the heart of war, striking fear into the Nazi war machine. Who was this woman who became the deadliest female sniper of all time? What drove her to face the challenges of Sevastopol? How did her courage reshape a world at war? This documentary is for educational purposes and analyzes historical facts from a neutral perspective. We are strongly against violence and war in all its forms. This is Lyudmila Pavlichenko's story. The Second World War was a tempest that swept across continents, a conflict that claimed tens of millions of lives and redrew the map of human history. In June 1941, Nazi Germany unleashed Operation Barbarossa, a colossal invasion of the Soviet Union, the largest military operation the world had ever witnessed. Over 3 million Axis troops, supported by thousands of tanks, artillery batteries, and swarms of Luftwaffe aircraft, tore through Soviet defenses like a scythe through wheat. Entire cities were reduced to smoldering ruins, villages erased from existence, and millions of lives shattered in mere weeks. The Soviet Union, caught off guard by the speed and ferocity of the assault, reeled under the onslaught, its western territories falling at a terrifying pace. Ukraine, Belarus, the Baltic states, all were swallowed by the Nazi tide, their people subjected to immense hardships, mass executions, forced labor, and the systematic destruction of their way of life. Whole Soviet armies were encircled in vast pincer movements, their soldiers neutralized on the battlefield or marched into harsh prisoner-of-war camps where hunger, illness, and cruelty took countless lives. By the summer of 1941, the Red Army was a shadow of its former strength, its ranks reduced, its resources stretched to the breaking point. The Soviet leadership faced a grim reality. The survival of the nation depended on mobilizing every available resource, every citizen, every ounce of will. Yet, in this darkest hour, the Soviet people rose to meet the challenge. From the industrial heartlands of Moscow to the remote farmlands of Siberia, ordinary citizens became warriors, driven by a fierce determination to defend their homeland from the fascist invader. Among them was a young woman named Lyudmila Pavlichenko, whose name would soon become a legend whispered in awe by allies and in dread by enemies. Born on July 12, 1916, in the Ukrainian town of Bila Tserkva, Lyudmila was no soldier by birth. She was a studious girl, her mind razor-sharp, her heart filled with dreams of a quiet life as a historian, poring over ancient manuscripts and unraveling the mysteries of civilizations long gone. Her childhood was marked by the turbulence of a young Soviet Union, a nation striving to rebuild itself after revolution and civil war. She grew up hearing stories of sacrifice and struggle, which shaped her sense of duty and resilience. But war has a cruel way of rewriting dreams, and Lyudmila's path would lead her not to the halls of academia, but to the challenging battlefields of her homeland, where her rifle would write a new kind of history, one etched in courage and defiance. At 25, she was a university student in Kyiv, her future bright with promise. Her days filled with lectures and late-night study sessions, her mind alive with ideas about the past and hopes for the future. Then came the Nazi invasion, a thunderbolt that shattered her world and set her on a path of destiny. When the call to arms echoed across the Soviet Union, Lyudmila did not hesitate. Driven by an unyielding love for her country and a burning resolve to resist the invaders, she volunteered to fight, choosing the solitary, demanding path of a sniper, a role that demanded not brute strength but precision, patience, and an unbreakable spirit, qualities she possessed in abundance. Her journey would take her from the besieged streets of Odessa to the rocky cliffs of Sevastapole and finally to the frozen, challenging ruins of Sevastopol, where she would face her greatest test and cement her place as one of history's most formidable warriors. Lyudmila was the daughter of a government clerk and a schoolteacher, raised in a modest home where education was the cornerstone of life. From her earliest days, Lyudmila stood out. Her quick mind and fierce determination set her apart from her peers. She was a voracious reader, her love for history blossoming as she devoured tales of ancient empires, heroic battles, and the rise and fall of civilizations. "I wanted to understand why people fought," she later wrote in her memoirs. "What drove them to sacrifice everything for a cause?" Her parents nurtured her curiosity, encouraging her to dream big despite their limited means. At 14, the family moved to Kyiv, the vibrant, historic capital of Ukraine, where Lyudmila thrived in the city's intellectual atmosphere. She excelled in school, earning praise from teachers for her analytical mind and relentless work ethic. But Lyudmila was no stranger to toil. To help support her family, she took a job as a teenager in a Kyiv factory, grinding metal in the noisy, grimy workshops, her hands calloused from long hours of labor. The work was grueling, but it taught her resilience, patience, and the value of perseverance, qualities that would later save her life on the battlefield. In her spare time, seeking an escape from the factory's monotony, she joined a local shooting club, a decision that would prove fateful. There, handling a rifle for the first time, she discovered an uncanny talent. The weight of the weapon, the focus required to align the sights, the steady breath before the shot. It all came naturally to her. "I wasn't trying to be a soldier," she recalled, "but I loved the precision, the focus. It was like solving a puzzle with every shot." Her skill was remarkable. She outshot many of her male peers, her steady hands and sharp eyes making her a standout. By 1937, Lyudmila had enrolled at Kyiv University, pursuing a degree in history, her dream of becoming a scholar within reach. She spent her days in lecture halls, absorbing lessons on medieval Europe, the Russian Empire, and the revolutions that shaped the modern world. She was particularly fascinated by the role of individuals in shaping history, a theme that would soon take on a profound personal meaning. Yet, even as she built her academic life, the world around her was growing darker. The rise of Nazi Germany cast a long shadow over Europe, its aggressive expansion and hateful ideology threatening the fragile peace. By 1941, the threat of war loomed like a storm on the horizon, and Lyudmila, like many of her generation, sensed the coming upheaval. When Nazi forces invaded the Soviet Union on June 22, 1941, her world was upended. The news of German tanks rolling into Soviet territory, of cities bombed and civilians harmed, struck her like a physical blow. She listened to radio reports of damaged villages, of families torn apart, and felt a fire ignite in her heart. "I couldn't stay on the sidelines," she wrote. "My country was struggling and I had to act." Dropping her studies, she marched to a Red Army recruitment office in Kyiv, determined to fight. The recruiters, grizzled veterans of earlier conflicts, were skeptical. A woman, a sniper. The idea seemed absurd in a military steeped in tradition. "Go home, girl," one officer told her. "War is no place for you." But Lyudmila was undeterred, her resolve as unyielding as steel. To prove her worth, she demanded a field test, standing before a firing range under the scrutiny of her doubters. With calm precision, she fired at distant targets, hitting two with remarkable accuracy, the crack of her rifle silencing the room. Her performance left no room for argument. In August 1941, she was accepted into the Red Army's 25th Rifle Division, issued a Mosin-Nagant rifle, a rugged bolt-action weapon with a 7.62mm caliber and a telescopic sight, and sent to the front. Her training was a demanding immersion in the art of war, a crash course in survival, marksmanship, and stealth. She learned to crawl through mud and brambles, to camouflage herself in grass, rubble, and snow, to hold her breath for the perfect shot. Her instructors, many of them seasoned snipers, recognized her potential, but warned her of the dangers ahead. "A sniper lives in the shadows," one told her. "You strike unseen, but the enemy will hunt you relentlessly." Lyudmila absorbed every lesson, her mind as sharp as her aim. She practiced endlessly, mastering the Mosin-Nagant's quirks, its heavy recoil, its temperamental bolt in cold weather, the way its sight could fog in rain. She learned to calculate wind speed, to adjust for distance, to anticipate an enemy's movement. Her training also included psychological preparation, steeling her for the act of neutralizing threats, a burden she would carry for the rest of her life. By the time she was deployed, Lyudmila was no longer a student of history. She was ready to make it, her rifle an instrument of resistance, her heart a fortress against fear. Lyudmila's initiation into combat came in Odessa, August 1941, a vital Black Sea port city under siege by Axis forces led by the German 4th Army and Romanian troops. The 25th Rifle Division, her unit, was tasked with holding the line against a relentless enemy determined to seize the city at any cost. Odessa was a maelstrom of destruction. Historic buildings crumbled under artillery barrages, streets were choked with rubble, and the air was thick with acrid smoke, the cries of the injured and the roar of explosions. Lyudmila, now a private in the Red Army, was thrust into this chaotic environment, her Mosin-Nagant rifle, her only companion in a world gone mad. The sniper's role was unlike any other in warfare, solitary, precise, and unforgiving. She learned to blend into the ruins, her body pressed against cold, jagged stone, her breath slow and steady as she waited for hours, sometimes days, for the perfect target. "Every shot was a message," she wrote in her memoirs. "You invade our land, you pay the price." Her first engagement was a German soldier, caught in her crosshairs as he crossed a debris-strewn street, unaware of the danger. The moment was surreal. Time slowed as she aligned her sight, exhaled, and pulled the trigger. The soldier fell, and Lyudmila felt a jolt of shock, the weight of neutralizing a threat pressing against her chest. "It was him or us," she later reflected. "I chose us, but I never forgot his face." That first engagement hardened her, preparing her for the grim necessity of her role. In just 2 months, she recorded 187 confirmed engagements, each one a Nazi soldier, machine gunner, scout, or officer, each one verified by her spotter, a young soldier named Mikhail who became her trusted partner. Her precision was uncanny, her ability to remain unseen almost supernatural. She targeted high-value enemies, disrupting German operations with every pull of the trigger. She would lie in wait, camouflaged in rubble or foliage, her body aching from immobility, her eyes scanning for the slightest movement. A glint of sunlight on a helmet, a shadow shifting in a window. Her shots were surgical, often striking officers whose losses threw German units into disarray. A fellow sniper, Ivan Petrov, recalled her in awe. Lyudmila was like a ghost. She'd lie in wait for hours, motionless, then, crack, one shot, one eliminated German. We all looked up to her, even the men who doubted her at first. Her reputation spread like wildfire among Soviet troops, her name a source of pride and hope in a city under siege. Civilians, too, whispered of the young woman whose rifle protected them from the enemy's advance. A school teacher, Anna Sokolova, hiding in a basement with her students, later said, "We heard of a sniper named Lyudmila, a girl who neutralized Nazis with every shot. She gave us courage to survive." But Odessa was a losing battle. The Axis forces tightened their grip, their superior numbers and firepower overwhelming the Soviet defenses. By October 1941, The city fell, and Lyudmila's unit was evacuated by sea, their spirits battered but unbroken. The evacuation was chaotic. Ships crowded with injured soldiers and civilians, German planes strafing from above. Lyudmila stood on the deck, her rifle clutched tightly, watching Odessa's skyline burn, vowing to fight on. Her legend, however, was just beginning. She was sent to Sevastopole, a Crimean stronghold perched on rocky cliffs where the fighting was even more ferocious. The city was a linchpin of Soviet resistance, its port critical to Black Sea operations. From October 1941 to July 1942, Sevastopol endured a harsh siege, German and Romanian forces hammering its defenses with artillery, airstrikes, and infantry assaults. Lyudmila hunted in the hills and ruins, her rifle a constant threat to the enemy. She faced not only German soldiers, but their elite snipers, trained in counter-sniper tactics at specialized schools, who stalked her in return. These duels were nerve-shattering, a demanding game of cat and mouse where a single misstep meant defeat. Lyudmila adapted, using cunning to outwit her foes. She employed decoys, helmets propped on sticks, mirrors flashing in sunlight, to draw enemy fire, revealing their positions. She moved constantly, never staying in one spot too long, her instincts honed by months of combat. She endured relentless shelling, her body bruised and battered, her ears ringing from concussive blasts. The physical toll was immense. Hunger, exhaustion, and the constant threat of danger wore at her, but her resolve remained unshaken. "I thought of the children in damaged villages," she wrote. "That kept me going." Her tally climbed. 200, 250, 309 confirmed engagements by June 1942. Making her the deadliest female sniper in history. Her targets included not just soldiers, but key personnel, officers, radio operators, artillery spotters, whose losses crippled German coordination. A Soviet officer, Colonel Yuri Volkov, noted, "Pavlichenko wasn't just a soldier, she was a symbol. Her name alone made the Germans tremble. They called her Lady Death, and they weren't wrong." The Germans, infuriated by her effectiveness, targeted her specifically, broadcasting propaganda to demoralize her and offering rewards for her capture. Yet Lyudmila remained elusive, her training and instincts keeping her one step ahead. But Sevastopol was a crucible of suffering. She was injured multiple times. Shrapnel grazed her leg, tearing through muscle. A bullet clipped her arm, leaving a jagged scar. A nearby blast left her concussed, her vision blurred for days. Each injury tested her resolve, but she refused to quit. "I fought for my people," she wrote. "Pain was nothing compared to their suffering." The psychological toll was heavier still. Each engagement weighed on her, the faces of her targets haunting her dreams. "I saw them as humans," she confided in her memoirs, "but I had to see them as threats to survive." In July 1942, Sevastopol fell after a relentless Axis assault, its defenses shattered. Lyudmila was evacuated by submarine, barely escaping with her life, her body scarred, her spirit weary but unbroken. The fall of Sevastopol was a bitter blow, but her reputation was unassailable. She had become a legend, her rifle a beacon of resistance in a nation fighting for its very existence. In October 1941, Lyudmila arrived in Sevastopol, a city teetering on the edge of oblivion. The Battle of Sevastopol was a clash of titans, a struggle that would define the outcome of the Second World War. Hitler's 11th Army, over 300,000 strong and commanded by General von Manstein, descended on the city, determined to crush the Soviet stronghold named for Empress Catherine herself. The Luftwaffe pounded Sevastopol into rubble, turning factories, homes, schools, and hospitals into jagged skeletons of steel and stone. The Red Army, battered but defiant, transformed every ruin into a fortress, every street into a defensive ground. This was urban warfare at its most demanding, house by house, room by room, where survival was a daily gamble against danger. Snipers reigned supreme in this harsh landscape, their rifles weaving a web of fear through the shattered city. Lyudmila, now a lieutenant after her promotions for valor, was among the best, her reputation preceding her like a storm. "The city was a graveyard," she wrote in her memoirs. "Buildings collapsed, the Chernaya ran red with losses, but every Nazi I neutralized was one less threat to our people." Her Mosin-Nagant spoke with deadly precision, its 7.62mm rounds finding their marks with surgical accuracy. She targeted German officers whose losses sowed chaos in their ranks and machine gunners whose suppression fire pinned Soviet troops. She perched in bombed-out buildings, her body pressed against icy concrete, her breath barely stirring the air as she waited for her targets, sometimes for hours in freezing conditions. A German officer, captured later in the battle, confessed, "We feared Pavlichenko more than bombs. Her shots came from nowhere, and our men fell like flies. We called her the Devil's Daughter." Lyudmila's engagements in Sevastopol added to her tally, though exact numbers are lost to the chaos of the battle, with estimates suggesting dozens more in her months there. Her impact, however, was undeniable. She disrupted German operations, forced their soldiers to cower behind cover, and bought precious time for Soviet defenders to regroup. Her presence alone was a psychological weapon, her name whispered in dread by German troops who scanned the ruins for her hidden perch. Beyond her own rifle, Lyudmila became a mentor, training a cadre of young snipers, many of them women, in the art of urban warfare. She led by example, teaching them to navigate the city's labyrinth of rubble, to use shadows and debris as camouflage, to strike and vanish before the enemy could retaliate. Leonid Kitsenko, one of her students, recalled, "Lyudmila taught us to be patient, to think like hunters. She'd say, 'Don't rush the shot. Let the enemy come to you.' She was our rock, our guide through that hell." Lyudmila's lessons were practical but profound. She showed her recruits how to read the battlefield, to spot the glint of a German helmet in a broken window, to notice the careless gesture of an officer giving orders, to use the city's ruins as both shield and weapon. She emphasized teamwork, pairing snipers with spotters to maximize their effectiveness, a tactic that saved countless lives. Her training sessions, often held in brief lulls between battles, were intense. Her voice calm but commanding as she corrected aim or demonstrated camouflage techniques. "She made us believe we could survive," Kitsenko added. "That was her greatest gift." But Sevastopol was a merciless crucible, a test of endurance that pushed even Lyudmila to her limits. By November 1941, winter descended with a vengeance, temperatures plunging to -30°C. Snow blanketed the ruins, piling in drifts that hid debris and remnants. Ice coated every surface, making movement treacherous, and frostbite affected fingers, toes, and noses, leaving scars. Hunger gnawed at the defenders, their rations reduced to scraps of stale bread, thin soup made from boiled leather, or the occasional frozen potato scavenged from ruined cellars. Lyudmila's uniform, patched and threadbare, offered little protection against the biting wind that howled through the city's shattered streets. Her boots, worn thin, let in snow and slush, numbing her feet. Yet she endured, her rifle steady despite trembling hands and an empty stomach. "We were half dead," she wrote. "But surrender wasn't an option. We fought for every inch, every life." The physical toll was matched by the psychological strain. Lyudmila lived in constant danger, knowing that German snipers and patrols hunted her specifically, their orders to eliminate the infamous Lady Death. She faced near misses. A bullet that grazed her helmet, a shell that collapsed a wall inches from her position. Each close call sharpened her instincts but deepened her exhaustion. The faces of her targets continued to haunt her, a growing gallery of ghosts in her dreams. "I never grew numb to it," she confessed. "Each shot cost me something." In one harrowing mission, she was injured by shrapnel, a jagged piece grazing her face during a German artillery barrage that turned the air into a storm of metal. Her uniform was damaged, but she refused to retreat. "I stitched it myself," she recalled, her hands shaking as she threaded a needle through torn skin. The fight wasn't over. Her resolve became a legend among Soviet troops, her presence a rallying cry in a city on the brink. A soldier, Sergei Morozov, said, "Seeing Lyudmila in the ruins, still fighting despite her injuries, gave us strength. She was our hope, our proof that we could endure." A Soviet medic, Olga Petrova, who treated Lyudmila's shoulder injury, added, "She was pale, but her eyes burned with defiance. She wouldn't let us take her from the front." Lyudmila's actions in Sevastopol were not just about engagements. They were about defiance, about proving that even in the darkest hour, the human spirit could endure. Her shots echoed through the city, a promise to her people that the Nazis would not prevail. She fought not only for survival, but for the civilians trapped in the city, the children huddling in basements, the families clinging to hope. Her courage inspired others to hold the line, contributing to the Soviet defense that would eventually turn the tide. In June 1942, Lyudmila's injuries and exhaustion forced her evacuation from Sevastopol, her body battered by shrapnel and the relentless grind of combat. But her war was far from over. The Soviet command recognized her value not just as a sniper, but as a symbol of resistance, a living testament to the unbreakable spirit of their people. They gave her a new mission, to rally support for the Soviet cause on the international stage, to show the world the cost of the war and the urgency of the Allied effort. In August 1942, she embarked on a historic journey to the United States and Canada, becoming the first Soviet citizen to visit the White House. There, she met President Franklin Roosevelt and First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt, who described her as a remarkable woman, forged by fire. Lyudmila's presence was electrifying, a young woman, barely 26, who had faced the Nazi war machine and emerged unbroken, her scars a map of her sacrifice. She spoke to crowds across North America, her words cutting through the complacency of those far from the front lines. In Chicago, she addressed a packed auditorium, her voice steady but fierce, her Soviet uniform adorned with medals glinting under the lights. "I'm 26 years old, and I've neutralized 309 fascists. Gentlemen, don't you think you've been hiding behind my back for too long?" The audience erupted in applause, her blunt honesty shocking and inspiring in equal measure, galvanizing support for the Allied war effort. Newspaper headlines across the continent praised her as Lady Death, a heroine whose courage shamed nations into action. A Canadian journalist, Margaret Thompson, wrote, "Pavlichenko's story was a wake-up call. She stood before us, scarred but unbowed, and we knew we had to do more for the war." Lyudmila's tour was a diplomatic triumph, strengthening the bonds between the Soviet Union and its allies, securing vital aid, tanks, planes, food, and supplies that would bolster the Red Army's fight. Her speeches were not just calls to action, but windows into the Soviet struggle, vivid accounts of damaged cities, struggling children, and the relentless courage of her people. In Washington, D.C., she met with American diplomats, including Undersecretary of State Sumner Welles, who noted, "Ms. Pavlichenko's conviction was infectious. She made us see the war through her eyes, and it changed our perspective." Her impact went beyond politics. She challenged gender stereotypes, proving that women could be warriors, leaders, and voices for change. In New York, she addressed a women's rally, her words resonating with thousands. "We're fighting for a world where no one lives in fear. You can help us win it." Her call inspired women to volunteer for war work. From factory assembly lines to nursing units, their efforts fueled by Lyudmila's example. Yet, beneath her steely exterior, Lyudmila was deeply human, her strength tempered by vulnerability. In private moments, she confided to Eleanor Roosevelt about the toll of war, her voice breaking as she spoke of lost comrades and shattered lives. "I've seen too much loss," she said. "I just want peace for my people." Eleanor, moved by her candor, became a lifelong friend, their correspondence continuing long after the war, a bond forged in shared compassion. Lyudmila's vulnerability revealed the woman behind the legend, a young historian who had traded her dreams for a rifle, who carried the weight of her 309 engagements not as trophies, but as a burden she bore for her nation. Her tour was not without challenges. She faced skepticism from some Western audiences who struggled to reconcile her femininity with her formidable record. Reporters asked intrusive questions about her appearance or personal life, which she deflected with sharp wit. In her poise, she told one journalist, "I'm here to talk about the war, not my hairstyle." Her poise under pressure won over doubters, her authenticity shining through. Lyudmila's mission was a testament to the power of one woman's voice to move nations, to bridge divides, and to remind the world of the stakes in the fight against fascism. After the war, Lyudmila returned to a Soviet Union scarred by years of significant loss. Millions affected, cities in ruins, families torn apart. She completed her history degree at Kyiv University, fulfilling her pre-war dream of becoming a scholar, her thesis exploring the Russo-Turkish wars of the 18th century. But the war's shadow never fully lifted. She worked as a historian for the Soviet Navy, researching maritime history, her days filled with quiet study in archives rather than the crack of gunfire. "I did my duty," she said in a rare interview, her voice soft but firm. "I don't need fame." Yet her story continued to inspire, a beacon for a nation rebuilding from ashes. A Soviet veteran, Alexei Ivanov, recalled, "Pavlichenko showed us what courage looks like. She was our pride, our proof that we could endure anything." Lyudmila avoided the spotlight, living simply in Kyiv, her apartment modest, her life centered on scholarship and reflection. She corresponded with friends, including Eleanor Roosevelt, sharing thoughts on peace and progress. But the war's toll lingered. Her injuries ached in cold weather. Her sleep was plagued by nightmares of Sevastopol's ruins. She rarely spoke of her engagements, deflecting questions with a quiet smile. "I fought for life," she told a young historian who interviewed her. "That's what matters." Her legend, however, grew beyond her control. Her name immortalized in Soviet songs, poems, books, and later films. In 1957, she revisited Sevastopol, walking the cliffs where she had fought, her eyes distant as she remembered fallen comrades. "They were the real heroes," she said, tears glinting. Lyudmila died in 1974, aged 58, her health worn by the war's lasting toll. Chronic pain from old injuries, heart strain from years of stress, and the weight of memories she carried silently. In Moscow, her Winchester rifle is displayed in the Central Armed Forces Museum, its wooden stock worn but proud, a relic of her defiance. A civilian survivor, Maria Kuznetsova, who lived through Sevastopol's siege, said, "Lyudmila was our guardian. Her shots kept us alive. Her courage gave us hope." Her 309 confirmed engagements were more than statistics. They were a stand against tyranny, a testament to a woman who faced the abyss and refused to flinch. Lyudmila Pavlichenko was more than a sniper. She was a daughter, a scholar, a warrior who reshaped history with every shot, every speech, every act of defiance. From Sevastopol's frozen ruins to the world stage, she proved one woman could change the course of war. "I fought for life," she wrote in her final memoir, "for a world free of fear." Her courage echoes today, a call to those who hear it, a reminder to face their own battles with her unyielding resolve. Her story challenges us to ask, what can we endure? What can we build from our struggles? How does her defiance inspire us to shape a better future? Lyudmila, Lady Death, teaches us that heroes are not born. They are forged in fire, in the crucible of conviction, in the heart of defiance. So, what do you think? Could you have stood in those shoes of hers? Share your thoughts with us in the comments below. If Lyudmila's story moved you, give us a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell for more epic stories of war and resilience. Until next time, keep exploring history with Epic War. Keep asking questions. Keep seeking the truth.